Big Ten Media Days is underway, and so far, well, it could use a little bit more excitement. Let's spice it up next.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.
All right, welcome. Day 2 of Big Ten Media Days, starting as you're listening here. I'm Connor Happer from 1620 The Zone in Omaha. Mitch Sherman from The Athletic, live on the scene. You see that little note on the bottom there, live from Big Ten Media Days. That's where Mitch Sherman is. Well, he's at his hotel room right now. We'll get him out there and rolling. It is Nebraska Day today at Big Ten Media Days, one of the teams going today. We'll get a little bit on them and what might be said and go through a couple of things on Nebraska here in a little bit. Let's start with some things from day one. Mitch is the conference commissioner. Tony Petitti got his crack at kind of a State of the Union, as he does every year. And you know, he gets to talk about all the things that they did that were successful. Volleyball Day in Nebraska, got to mention in that.
Started it off. I think he started it off with Volleyball Day in Nebraska. Yeah, I was on a plane. As we'll get to that in the second segment, but yeah, I heard he started it off with the tribute to women's sports around the league, which is I know what everybody came to Big Ten Football Media Day for.
That's right, but he's got the platform and he's indeed using it right now. So you got all the different things from around the conference, but from a football perspective, the big topics are the big topics. Every conference commissioner is getting asked the same thing. You know, what's going to happen with expansion? Are you planning on expanding anymore? And how do you plan on handling the house settlement? How do the schools plan on handling that? So we touched on a variety of those things. One thing that I thought, and we could start with this off the top, you know, he mentioned that the Big Ten football championship is going to stay at Lucas Oil Stadium, right where they were in Indianapolis yesterday through 2028 and will be through the next couple of days. So it's staying there, and that's kind of the central hub for the Big Ten now as we move away from Chicago a little bit. But he was asked about, you know, spreading around some of the other championships and, you know, maybe the football championship eventually after you get down the line a little bit as the conferences expanded westward. It sounds like, and I'll read you the quote. He says, having said that, I think you'll see us begin to expand. I think it's important to make sure markets around the country get to experience Big Ten championships. It's a really good way to connect the conference. I think over time, you'll start to see geographic footprint expand, keeping in mind competitive issues. So that's a pretty good signal to me. If you care about, you know, where the Big Ten basketball championship might be, some various other ones. We host the Big Ten baseball championship here in Omaha. That's staying for at least a few more years, and it's been a good host to it. But I imagine that's a pretty good signal that, you know, Vegas is probably going to get in the loop here. Los Angeles is probably going to get in the loop here, and we'll see what other West Coast cities kind of get in on some Big Ten championships.
Yeah, that was about the biggest news that he broke at in his State of the Big Ten. I think some people went in expecting that Tony Petitti would have some definitive things to say about the house settlement, maybe about roster limits, like he would take a stand. You know, the Big Ten is going to put its foot down and not allow this to happen, or we're going to force this through, because so much of the narrative around college sports over the last year to 2 years has been about the Big Ten and the SEC and how they just run the show. These two leagues run the show. And I don't know that I necessarily got that vibe from reading the media coverage and listening to some of the sound that Tony Petitti put out there. Now, maybe this isn't the stage for that. Maybe he does that work behind closed doors. You know, he's got his iron fist and he sits there at the head of the table with Greg Sankey. I will say Sankey sells it a little bit better to the media than what I heard from Petitti today, as someone who was like the co-czar of college sports in this day and age when the NCAA is like dissipating in whatever power it has left. You would like to see him more demonstrative, I would say. And it's something that maybe he'll choose to do moving forward. This is just his second time here at this event. We'll see. Or maybe he wants to be a little bit more laid back, as someone who observes this in this time of great uncertainty in college sports where the Big Ten does wield a lot of power, I would like to see a more powerful presentation off the bat from the commissioner who's in charge of the whole thing.
Yeah, and that was kind of the story all the way through. I mean, obviously expansion is a big topic. There was nothing definitive. He did say, "Hey, look, we're focused on our 18 right now," which we're focused on 18 is a pretty funny statement. You know, they've done a lot of work over the last year or so plus to try and integrate those West Coast teams in. You don't know how it's going to exactly look in that first year as we're heading into right now. But he says, "I think we're really comfortable where we are." And he also says we've got to get this conference right, and that's what our focus is. I think there's just across the board, Mitch, and you mentioned Sankey there too. I think there's a sense from both of those two commissioners, the two most powerful people in college athletics, that they've done enough. They've consolidated kind of enough power at this point, and they're making money hand over fist, and they have great TV deals and stuff like that. And everybody else is kind of chasing those two. And I get the sense that those two conferences, including, the Big Ten and the SEC, are just kind of fine where they are right now, or at the very least want to see it play out over the next couple of years.
Yeah, they've messed with everybody else in the world enough that they don't need to come out and put on a power play in July and just remind the rest of the college sports world of exactly where the Big Ten and the SEC stands, and everyone else, how they have to look up at them. Like they've ended the Pac-12, essentially the Big Ten, and then the Big 12 came in and cleaned up the leftovers, and here we are left with schools fleeing to the ACC, which is also on the brink of being in shambles, and then others that are just left to have like an open bar night at Vegas during Pac-12 media days. So I agree with you on that, in that sense that he probably doesn't need to throw his weight around so much in this venue after throwing it around all over college sports for the last year or two. But you kind of expect that now. You kind of expect it from the Big Ten. They got Oregon. They got a big giant duck floating down the river in downtown Indy.
Great
I'm looking
touch,
forward to
by the
seeing.
way.
Right. I'm looking forward to seeing that when I get out and I haven't actually. So, like, full disclosure here, we're taping this on Tuesday night, so we can get it out to all of you early on Wednesday. And I just got into town, so I'm coming off vacation and have had an interesting day of travel, but I haven't been out. I have not seen the duck yet. But I look forward as soon as we get done doing this, Connor, with going out and finding the duck, maybe taking a selfie with the duck. I wonder if there are any Washington fans who would like to deflate the duck, something like that. Fans don't really come to Big Ten Media Day anymore.
No, and I mean, it's you go to the city and being at that event a few times now, like you don't get the sense that it's like even happening there. A lot like some of the championships when they kind of come to town. It's just like, okay, here we are, and when the SEC goes to Dallas, they're like, we're here, we're taking over. This is kind of our territory. To your point, I think that that kind of tracks. But that's been the Big Ten's MO. They do it pretty quietly, and there's like this kind of morality to it that they always like to talk about. So I don't know about I don't know how much you can tote that when you've destroyed an entire conference and all those things. But yeah.
You're making $1 billion a year on TV rights alone. It is hard to be humble when that is the MO. We were just talking a few weeks ago when Oklahoma and Texas had their big celebrations, and we kind of made fun of the celebrations that they had and said, hey, the Big Ten's not going to do this on August 2nd when the 4 former Pac-12 schools come in. They're not going to have these giant celebrations. And I still believe that to be the case. Look, those football programs are going to be in camp at that time. They're not going to have time to go out and have concerts and have big events in their stadiums. So it's not the middle of the summer anymore. And I think we like that. So if we like that, then maybe we should like the Big Ten's more measured approach to rocking the boat in all of college sports. But when you got the big duck in the river, then that makes you think that there's something coming from the commish that we maybe didn't get. He did talk about roster limits, which for my money is one of the biggest issues that impacts Nebraska. and he was somewhat vague. He said that the reporting on the issue had been accurate, and there's been a lot of reporting about 105 being set as the limit. Petitti said that among the power conferences, the Big Ten has been pushing the upper end of that. So perhaps working on some negotiations where you can get up to 110 or 115. I don't think it's going to go beyond that. And it's probably still going to be a few months before all of the numbers are released and what we'll find out what we're looking at with football roster limits. But Nebraska, as we know, is in that 140 to 150 range. And if they're under 150 when camp opens next week, we know there'll be 120 in camp. That's the limit for camp. But then 25, 30 more can come in as soon as school begins. To get down to 105, 110, 115 from that, I'm really interested, as Troy Dannon said, the devil's in the details. I'm really interested to see how that works. If players who are on the roster above the limit are grandfathered in until they age out, kind of like the extra year with COVID thing, or if, you can do it in a staggered format where year one, you've got to cut it by 20%, and then, you got to be 50% closer in year two. I don't know, but that's going to be really instrumental in kind of shaping opinions, I think, about how this is received by schools like Nebraska.
Yeah, I can't imagine it'll be a hard cut, but we'll see what the details are like when it comes out. One more quick note before we take a break and get to some Nebraska stuff here. Your colleague Stuart Mandel at The Athletic reported that the Rose Bowl, speaking of the Big Ten, has requested to be left out of the college football playoff semifinal rotation going forward. It is a I believe it's a quarterfinal game, as I was looking at it just now. For the next 2 years. They want to play that game on January 1st. They're gung-ho about playing that game on January 1st, and they're not giving it up. And so that's basically the story right now. It's a quarterfinal game for each of the next 2 years.
Okay.
And then they'll keep it that way. So they don't want to be mixed into the semifinal rotation to have to play a week later. They're going to play on January 1st because we're the Rose Bowl, damn it. And we're going to keep playing on January 1st. We love the sunset behind the San Gabriels.
That tracks. That tracks with how the Rose Bowl has acted over its history. And I'm not shocked. And the Rose Bowl knows that it has some leverage too and can kind of say and do what it wants to do. But hey, it's a bigger stage to be on the semis or the championship. I guess I would have said, if you want to find a permanent host for the college football championship, like baseball has in Omaha, make it the Rose Bowl, and no one would disagree with that. In college sports is my my belief, but whatever, they're going to be a quarterfinal, so let them have it.
We'll get back into Nebraska's day at Big Ten Media Days coming back, but please subscribe and follow us on Twitter at LockedOnNEB, or you can email us lockedonneb@gmail.com. We'll be back after this.
All right, Mitch Sherman here for Game Time. You know that if you've listened to this pod or watched us on YouTube, that we enjoy baseball, and we're going to talk to you during this ad read about the Royals. For many of you listening and watching, they are the closest team to your home location, so embrace it. You might go to a Royals game and see Bobby Witt get the chance to hit for the cycle in the 5th inning. You might also see a hapless opponent throw at him to prevent him from hitting for the cycle. It's all very entertaining. Go to a game. I promise you, Game Time will make that experience much easier because it is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball. Game Time makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the app go down the closer you get to first pitch. So whatever you're doing this summer, if it's Major League Baseball, if it's concerts, if it's a college football game that you're looking at getting tickets for in the fall, get it on Game Time. You can get flash deals, see views from your seat, customize your spot in the stadium. Download the app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download the app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, welcome back on this Wednesday of Big Ten Media Days. Day number 2 is set to go here in Indy. I am in Indy. I noticed on social media on Tuesday that Nebraska is also here. The Huskers, Matt Rule and Isaac Gifford, Ty Robinson, Ben Scott, they all got on a a chartered jet out of Lincoln on Tuesday afternoon, flew in luxury, made it in. I'm sure that they've got their feet up here on Tuesday night as we put this episode together. I did not do that. As you may have noticed, if you watched the past couple of episodes, I have traded in the mountainous poolside backdrop of San Diego, where I was vacationing with my family, for this dark hotel room in the corner of in downtown Indianapolis. I had lights crashing down on me when Connor signed on to our recording here. It's really quite depressing that I'm here now, just a few hours after leaving San Diego, but I'm going to make the best of it and get out to Lucas Oil Stadium on Wednesday and feel good about all of that. I almost didn't make it out of San Diego, which might not have been the worst thing in the world, but as I was riding in an Uber to the airport this morning before 6 a.m., I got a notification that my flight had been delayed 2 hours and I was going to miss my connection in Dallas. So I was able to fly standby a little earlier, make it in, and I got into Indy on time. So
nice.
Happy about that. Yeah.
Bad time to fly at the moment, unless you're, of course, taking the private Huskers jet. Nebraska, really during the entire Scott Frost era, they would show up on their morning of, and then they would just leave after they were done. Maybe a little, on brand, interesting that they come and they're here the night before and they're a little, prepared for what's going on. Well, maybe something to read into there. I don't know.
It will allow Matt Rule to craft an opening statement, which Scott Frost struggled to do on at least one occasion here at Big Ten Media Days. So while I was traveling today, I was able to watch the latest edition of Chasing 3. This is Nebraska's off-season documentary-style video series. And we've talked about this before, and I probably go overboard in lauding praise on the producers and the creators of this thing, but this was another episode that I would encourage people to watch. And as you listen and take in some of the sound and footage of Ty Robinson and Isaac Gifford in particular, the defensive guys who are here in Indy, take note of the players who are featured in this episode of Chasing 3. It's Jimari Butler, the defensive end, and Tommi Hill, Nebraska's cornerback, who's in his third year in the program, second year as a starter. Both of these guys, around the time of the coaching transition, almost left Nebraska. I mean, very close. Before the coaching transition, Jimari Butler was unhappy with the way things were moving in his career, and he actually went into the portal. In the portal, and Rule got him out of the portal. They didn't go into that specifically in the episode with Butler, but it was very clear he's had struggles. And last year, I won't spoil the thing, but last year after the season, had some real personal difficulties that his teammates helped him through. Tommi Hill was ready to leave the program I believe it was last spring. And Corey Campbell, Nebraska's strength coach, is portrayed in this episode as being hugely important in convincing Tommi Hill that this was the thing for him to do for his family. And we saw how that translated on the field last year. And he's a guy who a year from now might be in an NFL training camp. In fact, I think probably will be in an NFL training camp a year from now. So excellent storytelling with both of these players. Also got to learn a little bit more about the spring league, which I was vastly disinterested in as it was going on during the spring. But to hear Elliott Brown and Deshaun Singleton and I believe it was Isaiah Garcia Castaneda, the GMs of the spring teams, to see it through their eyes, that was interesting. Also, I'm talking this whole segment, but Kiera Mayo, the assistant director of football operations, she's featured in this portion of the Chasing 3 documentary also, and it was good. She's been around since the beginning of the Rule time, and it was one of the people who we haven't gotten to know maybe as much as some of the other figures in the football administrative side. I thought she had some really insightful and heartfelt comments about these two guys that shed a little bit of light on what Kiera Mayo does for Nebraska football too. So I'd encourage people to check it out. And finally, you really begin to see, I think, with the interactions and the comments that players made about their teammates, particularly the stuff that Nash, Hutmaker, and Ty Robinson said about Jimari Butler, and Isaac Gifford said about Tommi Hill, and some of the interactions with Tony White in this segment. You really start to see why that defense, or a part of the reason why that defense is as good as it is, because of how these guys feel about each other and the way they're going to go out on the field and play for each other.
It's so exciting that group got to kind of come together and play. And like you said, I mean, I think there was a lot of stuff, various points along the way that could have prevented this kind of group from coming back and having this season in front of them. But that is a group that has been here, mostly for a long time now. They're battle tested. They've had to make several different, decisions, not just whether to leave or to stay, but growing up and stuff like that. And so I think, there's an element of, man, they get to kind of do this one last ride all together. That's a real important thing for a defense. That's like, defense inherently in football that's what it's about. It's about kind of everybody locking arms and trusting each other and stuff like that. So it'll be really cool to watch those guys kind of play this out this year, because you just know it's really important to them, and that the doc certainly showed that.
We've brought it up and talking about the defense on earlier episodes in the summer and the spring about how, hey, it's the second year with all of these guys that we've mentioned here in this conversation. And just because of that, because it's the second year, because they're getting to understand the system, because they can play with more abandon and go after the ball and create turnovers, that it, by itself, it's going to make the black shirts a better group. That's all true. But I think what you see here on camera in the interviews and the scenes with these guys, and like there's scenes from Mobile, Alabama, in Jimari Butler's hometown, that tell you more about who he is and what he's been through. That to me takes it to another level in evaluating this defense and getting a sense of confidence about when their backs are against the wall, why they're more likely than not to come up with a big play.
It's going to be a group that has to be greater than the sum of its parts. They don't have a whole bunch of game breakers everywhere across the defense. So, I mean, having that bond is really, really important. So we'll hear from all those guys on Wednesday at Ben Scott on the offense as well, but Ty Robinson and Isaac Gifford will be there. Interested to hear about their journeys and how they feel about the defense going into 2024. We'll take a quick timeout and come back and unveil our number 5 most important Husker to Matt Rule's year 2 success. We'll be back after this, but first, if you're watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you have to turn down the volume with all the shouting, make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, which is a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today delivers can't-miss analysis, opinions, news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, back with the countdown here as we get ready to go for Nebraska Day at Big Ten Media Days. We have gone through the list. So far, we've talked about Javen Wright. We started at 10, although we could have started at like 30 or 40 if we really wanted to keep this thing going all summer long. We started at 10, Javen Wright, Tristan Alvano, Ben Scott, Thomas Fedoni, Jamal Banks, and we have reached number 5 on the camp countdown. Mitch, who do we have at number 5 with the drum roll?
We just got done talking about this guy a minute ago, and it is Isaac Gifford, the rover or safety in the heart of the Nebraska secondary. If you watch that episode of Chasing 3, you will see that he is the unquestioned leader of that group. And I would say now his importance, which is somewhat what we're assessing here, it rises because Nebraska has made a change with its defensive backs coach, with its secondary coach. You have John Butler coming in, been on the job for less than 2 weeks at this point. He needs to lean on Isaac Gifford. Sure, there are other players who can help him through this. I think Marquise Buford can be a great asset. for John Butler because of his experience. You know, I think Malcolm Hartzog, I think Tommi Hill, Deshaun Singleton, players who emerged last season, but the guy in that room who is the glue, and he's the reason that we put him at this spot, is Gifford. You know, all position groups, Connor, are important for one reason or another, and the quarterback is always going to rise to the top just because that's the nature of that spot. Offensive and defensive lines in the Big Ten, where Nebraska seems to have found its footing, are going to be near the top. I think there is an extra layer of importance with the secondary in this Tony White scheme because of the way that it works. You have five guys in the secondary. It makes up almost half of your defense. You want to be fast. You want to create chaos. And this year, maybe unlike last year when Nebraska played one of the worst lineups of quarterbacks in the history of its program, you're not going to do that necessarily. You're going to go to Ohio State. You're going to go to USC. You're going to bring UCLA into Lincoln. If nothing else, the Bruins, even in a bad year, can probably throw the ball around a little bit. There's going to be improved quarterback play seemingly at Iowa and Wisconsin. So yeah,
agreed.
So the secondary rises in importance as a result of that, and as does Gifford's play.
Well, I love it. I love his. You know, we could kind of take a second and like his journey has been awesome. I mean, I was doing high school games in Lincoln at the time, and you know, here's this kind of smaller, undersized guy, and they're like, oh, he's Luke Gifford's brother. Doesn't really have any offers or anything like that. I'm like, I'm watching Lincoln Southeast play. Like, that dude's making plays. Like he's I don't know. And what I kept getting back was, I just don't know where he fits. What does he do? You know, does he play linebacker? Does he play safety? Like, what is he going to be in a defense at the high, you know, Power 5 level? And I'm like, I don't care. Like, put that guy in and watch him make plays. And he's basically done that throughout his entire career, and to consistently do it and get better. Like, obviously there's you know, an athletic like ceiling on a guy like that. I don't want to cap him too much, but man, he has just made the most out of his opportunity at like 100 different turns at Nebraska. And so I think it's really cool to have him represented at media days. And like you said, to have him at number 5 on this list, you start looking at the people around him and just how important he is, maybe from a talent perspective or from a production perspective compared to the people around him. He's as accomplished as it gets, you know, on the defense as well. So it's really, really important that he's in that group, not only from a play standpoint, but from a leadership standpoint as well. I'm a huge fan of the kid, and you know, the journey's been really, really fun to watch.
Even when he got to Nebraska, I think there was a sense that, all right, this guy plays really hard. He's great in practice. He's great for the team. You know, he's going to be a leader no matter what his role is. If he never becomes a starter, he's still going to be somebody that people look to. And that's maybe what the prevailing thought about Isaac Gifford was for a year or two in the program. And then he started to get more action. And when Tony White came in with Matt Rule, I think that was just such an important moment for his development, in part, you know, because of the way they play defense and the togetherness that they strive to find, that we talked about a few minutes ago when we related that back to Jimari Butler and Tommi Hill. But also, I think the position that he plays, that rover spot, it's not something that every program has. You know, some go 4-3-4. You know, some go 5-2-4, whatever. And Nebraska is truly runs almost like a Big 12 kind of defense in the Big 10. And when Nebraska came into the Big 10, it was the belief, I think, of the college football world that you couldn't run a Big 12 kind of spread them out style of defense. And this 3-3-5 that you know, Tony White didn't invent it, but that he's adapted. It's like the Big Ten's answer to how you can run an athletic defense that can stop the pass and get after the pass rusher and still do it in a way where you're physical enough to succeed against a Michigan or an Ohio State. And we'll see. It may not always work. There might be teams now in this expanded league that expose the 3-3-5. But the fact is it worked last year for Nebraska, and I think it's going to be successful this year for Nebraska. And the rover spot that Gifford plays is very specific to this defense. So it's all just kind of fit together for him.
You have to have real trust. I mean, it seems like they're talking about creating chaos on the defensive side. That's what they're trying to do with all the defensive backs and all the guys kind of moving around, pieces everywhere. But it takes a lot of trust to run a defense like that, for everybody to kind of be in the right spot at the right time, and guys, going above and beyond on occasion as well. So he's at the absolute heart of that. So it'll be exciting to see him talk about it over the next couple of days.
He's a different kind of player than the safety / rovers that Nebraska had in some of its best years with Bo Pelini as the coordinator and the head coach. But those are the guys who I think drove the bus. They're the ones who were the engine of a great defense. Like somebody like an Eric Hagg or a Dijon Gomes. I mean, yeah, you had Sue and Levante David who were clearly great players. And I mean, look at their careers at the next level. I take nothing away from them. They were the heart and soul of that. Well, I might argue that some of the guys on the back were the heart and soul of that defense. In that Sue and Levante David, they were the stars. They were the All-Americans. And then the guys who were doing special things in the back, they were just every bit as much indispensable. And that's in a newer, modern, like Tony White kind of way. That's what Isaac Gifford gives you.
Mitch, I'm excited to see your coverage of Nebraska today, and we'll be back on this podcast on Thursday to kind of recap the whole thing. And if there was I doubt there will be any news or anything earth shattering, but it's a time to talk about big picture stuff. And Matt Rule's really good at that.
Yeah, absolutely. Rule's going to have some stuff to say. I think he's going to bring some life to Big Ten Media Days, at least in our world. It may not get noticed nationally, but I do think a lot of national folks are going to be interested to hear what he has to say on various issues around the league. I got a preview that's up on The Athletic today, Wednesday, that goes deeper into all of what you might want to expect from Nebraska during its day on the stage at Indy. So go check that out. We'll finish here with this message about Locked On and how it's launched its first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app.